Stop fearing failure. Trust God's timing, not your timeline. You know that meant when you're lying in bed at night staring at the ceiling wondering how your life ended up here. You didn't plan for this version of your story. You didn't imagine delays, detours, disappointments. You thought you'd be further along by now in your career, your calling, your healing, your growth. You've done the best you could, followed all the advice, maybe even prayed all the right prayers. But still, nothing seems to be moving the way you thought it would. And somewhere deep down you're starting to ask, did I fail? Or worse, did God forget me? I know that place. That space between faith and frustration. It's more crowded than we like to admit. It's where the enemy whispers lies about your worth, your timing, your purpose. It's where the fear of failure starts to sound like the voice of truth. And if we're not careful, it becomes the place where we start to believe that delay equals denial. That just because something hasn't happened yet, it's never going to. But here's something I need you to hear today, not just with your ears, but with your spirit. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not failing. You're just learning to trust a God who doesn't follow your timeline because he's working with something so much greater than a calendar, a clock. See, we live in a world that worships speed, productivity, and results. The pressure to make it by a certain age or season is real, and it's crushing people under the weight of false expectations. But God doesn't measure progress like we do. He doesn't panic over dead ends. He's not wringing his hands wondering why things haven't happened for you yet. He sees your whole story from beginning to end. And he's not in a hurry because what he's building in you is eternal. Failure. It's not what you think it is. It's not the end of the road. Sometimes it's just the first step toward becoming who you were truly made to be. And fear, that's not from your father. That's the voice trying to keep you stuck, small and silent. But today you get to choose a different voice. You get to stop letting fear drive your decisions. You get to stop worshiping your own timeline. And you get to start trusting the timing of the one who knows exactly what he's doing, even when you don't. So breathe. You're not behind. You're not broken. And you're definitely not alone. This is the moment where things start to shift, not because your circumstances suddenly change, but because your perspective does. Let's talk about how to stop fearing failure and start trusting God's timing like never before. Number one, the fear of failure, where it comes from and why it grips us. Let's be honest. Failure terrifies most of us. Not just because we don't want to mess up, but because deep down, we're afraid that messing up means we're not enough, that we're not good enough, smart enough, spiritual enough, fast enough, that if we fall behind or fall short, we'll lose our chance. And that's the fear that keeps people up at night, the fear of being disqualified before we ever get to the starting line. But where does that fear come from? It's not from God. Scripture tells us in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love, and of a sound mind." That means fear is not your inheritance as a child of God. It's an intruder, an imposter. But the tricky thing about fear is that it often wears masks. It doesn't always show up as panic or anxiety. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it sounds like procrastination. Sometimes it feels like comparison. Fear says don't try, you'll fail. Fear says don't speak, you'll be judged. Fear says don't wait, you're running out of time. And if you're not careful, you'll start obeying fear more than you obey faith. Here's what's wild though. Even people who love Jesus can be paralyzed by fear. You can believe in God's power and still doubt his timing. You can trust him in theory and still panic when life doesn't unfold the way you expected. And that's okay. God's not afraid of your fear, but he does want to set you free from it. Because fear of failure isn't just about outcomes. It's about identity. somewhere along the way, started believing that your worth was tied to your success, that your value was measured by results. But God sees you through a different lens. He doesn't love you because you're winning. He loves you because you're His. And when you start to see yourself through that lens, failure loses its grip. You don't have to see you falling when you know grace is what catches you. You don't have to fear losing time when you know God is the Redeemer of time. You don't have to fear missing the mark when you realize He already knew every twist in your journey and still called you. This isn't just about silencing fear. It's about remembering who you belong to. And when you know that, you walk differently, you wait differently, you fail differently, because failure is no longer your identity. It's just a moment, and moments don't define you. God does. Number 2. God's timeline is not broken. Yours might be. There's something incredibly humbling about realizing that you can plan everything right and still feel like nothing is working. You can do all the right things, say all the right prayers, even have all the right intentions, and still end up in a season that looks like silence, like waiting, like wandering. And it's in those moments we start to ask, God, what did I miss? But maybe you didn't miss anything. Maybe God's just not working on your timeline. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us of this truth. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways. My ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. That means God's timing isn't slow, it's sovereign. See, we all have this internal clock, this idea of when things should happen. By this age, I should be married. By this time, I should have started that business. By now, I should have my healing, my breakthrough, my answer. But God isn't operating off your internal countdown. He's not rushed by your expectations. He's not shaken by your delays. Look at Scripture. Joseph had a dream in his teens, but didn't walk into purpose until he was 30. David was anointed king as a young man, but spent years running, hiding, and waiting before he ever touched the throne. Sarah was promised a child and waited decades before Isaac was born. In each story, the promise was real, but the process was necessary. Because what we see as a delay, God often sees as development. He's not just preparing the promise for you. He's preparing you for the promise. If He gave it to you too soon, it might crush you. If He opened the door before you were ready, you might not recognize the responsibility that comes with it. So if you feel like nothing's happening, like life's on pause, trust that God is still moving, even when you can't see it, even when you don't feel it. His timeline hasn't failed. Yours just might be too focused on speed instead of surrender. Here's a thought. Maybe the delay is mercy. Maybe the unanswered prayer is protection. Maybe the silence is sacred space, where God is doing the kind of work that doesn't show up on Instagram or in job titles, but echoes into eternity. So stop measuring your life by what hasn't happened yet. Start trusting the God who sees what you can't. His timing is never off. And when it's finally time, not your time, but His, everything will come together in a way that makes you say, oh, now I see. And you will see, hold on. God's not late. He's just working beyond your timeline. Number 3, failure as a setup, not a setback. It's one of the hardest things to believe when you're in the middle of it, but failure doesn't mean the end. In fact, sometimes it means you're just getting started. See, we've been conditioned to believe that failure equals finality, that if something doesn't work out the way we hoped, it must not have been God. That if a door closes, or a dream crashes, or we fall flat on our face, we must have missed it. But what if failure is just one of God's favorite tools for redirection? Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Did you catch that? All things. Not just the easy things. Not just the picture-perfect, praise report-worthy moments. All things. That includes the heartbreak, the rejection, the wrong turn, the delay, the detour, even the failure. And here's what's powerful. Failure doesn't surprise God. You don't fall off his radar when you fall short. In fact, the very thing you thought disqualified you might be the place where he's doing his most important work. Think about Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers. He promised loyalty, swore he would never deny Christ, and then 3 times he did exactly that. If we're being honest, that looks like failure. Complete, undeniable failure. But Jesus didn't cancel Peter. He didn't toss him aside. After the resurrection, Jesus came looking for him, not to shame him, but to restore him, to remind him, you're still called, you're still loved, you're still mine. What if the same is true for you? What if the thing you call a failure is actually a turning point? What if it's the moment you stop trying to impress God and start learning to depend on him? What if it's the place where your pride gets stripped and your faith finally gets real? Some of the most powerful testimonies begin with, I thought it was over, but God wasn't done. So if something in your life feels broken right now, a relationship, a dream, a season, I want you to know, this isn't the end. It might be the middle. And God does some of his best work in the messy, unclear middle. You didn't fail. You were rerouted. And when God reroutes, he doesn't take the journey. He repurposes it. Your failure is not your identity. It's your classroom. Let him teach you. Let him lead you. Let him redeem what you thought was lost. Because the enemy may have meant it for harm, but your God, he's already turning it for good. Number 4, trusting God when you're running out of time. There's a kind of quiet panic that creeps in when you feel like time is slipping through your fingers. When birthdays start feeling more like deadlines. When you look around and it seems like everyone else is moving forward, getting married, starting families, launching ministries, living out dreams, and you're still waiting. It's hard not to hear that whisper. You're too late. But here's the truth. Psalm 31:15 says, my times are in your hands. Did you catch that? Your times, every moment, every season, every delay, every chapter, they're in God's hands. Not the world's, not the algorithms, not your expectations, not even your past. His. That means time doesn't rule you. God does. You're not behind schedule. You're in divine alignment. And if you're surrendered to him, he knows exactly when to move, when to open the door, when to shift things in your favor. He's not pacing heaven wondering why you haven't hit your milestones. He's the one writing your story, and he doesn't make mistakes. Let me remind you of Sarah. God promised her a child, and she waited years, long past the age that seemed humanly possible. She probably thought the promise had expired. She probably thought she had expired. But when God showed up, right on time, she realized that delay didn't mean denial. It just meant development. Because while we count minutes, God is cultivating character. You might think you're running out of time, but God isn't. He created time, and when the moment is right, he can accelerate your journey in ways you never imagined. He can do in a year what you couldn't do in 10. He can breathe life into a dead situation and raise it back up. He did it with Lazarus. He did it with Jesus. And he can do it with your calling, your dreams, your relationships, your purpose. Don't let the ticking clock convince you that you are out of hope. Don't let the wedding photos, career milestones, or social media highlight reels around you make you doubt God's pace. Heaven isn't rushed. God is never early, never late, always right on time. So take the pressure off your shoulders. God's not limited by time, and because he's not, neither are you. What he started in you, he's still finishing, and it's going to be worth every minute you waited. Number 5. What happens when you let go of control? There's something incredibly exhausting about trying to hold everything together, trying to make the right decisions, meet the right people, hit the right milestones at the right time. You feel like if you don't get it just right, everything will fall apart. And so you tighten your grip, plan more carefully, stress more deeply, and trust a little less, even if you never say it out loud. But here's the hard truth. Control is an illusion, and fear loves to disguise itself as control. We think if I can just figure it all out, I'll be safe. But what if the very thing we think will protect us is what's actually keeping us from peace? Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." It doesn't say, figure it all out, and God will bless it. It doesn't say, control the outcome, and you'll have peace. It says, trust. Let go of leaning on your understanding, because your understanding has limits. But God doesn't. He sees the whole picture. You only see a pixel. Let go of trying to force what God hasn't released yet. Let go of the need to have answers before you move. Let go of the fear that says if you stop striving, everything will fall apart. Because here's the truth. When you surrender control, you don't lose peace. You find it. Philippians 4:6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." You want that kind of peace. The peace that guards you, covers you, holds you steady when nothing around you makes sense. Then you have to give God your grip. And I get it, surrender feels risky. It feels like weakness. But in the kingdom of God, surrender is strength. It's not giving up. It's giving in to the one who actually knows what he's doing. So ask yourself, are you following God, or are you asking him to follow you? Are you surrendering the plan, or just asking him to bless the version you built? Here's the good news. Even if you've been holding on too tight, God's not angry with you. He's not disappointed. He's inviting you to rest, to trust, to finally let go. Not because he wants to take something from you, but because he wants to place something better in your hand. You don't have to keep carrying the weight of your life. It was never meant to rest on your shoulders in the first place. Number 6, moving forward with courage. Even when it feels risky. There comes a moment in your walk with God where you realize faith isn't always comfortable. In fact, most of the time it's not. Because faith asks you to move before you see, to obey before it makes sense, to say yes when fear is screaming no. And that's the tension. How do you move forward when everything in you says it's too risky? What if it doesn't work out? What if you step out and it all falls apart? But here's what God said to Joshua as he stood on the edge of the promised land, about to lead a generation into a future that felt massive and uncertain. "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1. This wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a command. Why? Because God knew that courage wouldn't come naturally in the face of risk. It had to be chosen. And the same is true for you. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's trusting God more than your fear. It's deciding, even if I don't see the whole picture, I'll still take the next step. It's saying, even if I've failed before, I'm not letting fear keep me frozen now. It's believing, even if the door doesn't open today, I'll still knock in faith because God is still good. The truth is, most of the time, obedience feels risky. It's uncomfortable. It stretches you. But that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're growing. You're walking by faith, not by sight. Remember Peter? He walked on water not because the conditions were safe, but because Jesus said, "Come," and Peter moved. He wasn't walking on logic. He wasn't walking on confidence. He was walking on a road. What's the word God has spoken to you? What's the promise he's whispered? What's the dream he planted in your spirit that still hasn't let you go? Don't wait for conditions to be perfect. They won't be. Don't wait to fearless. You won't. Move anyway. Trust anyway. Obey anyway. Because the safest place you can be is in obedience to God, even when it feels risky. And you don't have to take huge leaps. Sometimes faith looks like a small, quiet yes. The kind of yes that builds momentum. The kind of yes that unlocks the next door. The kind of yes that brings heaven's power into your ordinary day. So take the step, make the move, write the thing, apply again, apologize, forgive, begin again. Not because you're confident in yourself, but because you're confident in the one who's leading you. God is not asking you to be fearless. He's asking you to trust him more than your fear. Absolutely. Here is the final section of your content with number 7. And the conclusion, written to land aborefully and leave your audience deeply encouraged and grounded in faith. Number 7. God's faithfulness over time. Look back to move forward. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to look back, not with regret, but with remembrance. We get so caught up in what hasn't happened yet that we forget everything God has already done. We forget the prayers he's already answered, the doors he already opened, the moments when you thought you weren't going to make it, but somehow by his grace you did. And if you're walking through a season of waiting or uncertainty right now, I want to challenge you. Pause and remember. Lamentations 3:22-3 says, "Because of the Lord's great love we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." God's faithfulness is not a theory. It's a history. It's written all over your past. You just have to take the time to notice it. Start with this question. What has God already brought you through? What valleys did he lead you out of? What closed doors turned out to be divine protection? What moments felt like endings but became new beginnings? Think back to the times you thought it was over. When you didn't know how rent would get paid. When you didn't know how your heart would heal. When you didn't know how to move forward. And now, look at you. You're still standing, still breathing, still fighting. That didn't happen by accident. That's not luck. That's faithfulness. And the same God who carried you through those storms isn't going to leave you in this one. He hasn't brought you this far just to let you fall now. He's not done. His track record is perfect. And if you'll just pause long enough to remember that, your fear will shrink and your faith will rise. There's something powerful about remembrance. It shifts your posture. It reminds your soul of what's true. It takes your eyes off the unknowns of the future and puts them back on the proven character of God. So if you're tired, if you're frustrated, if you're starting to believe the lie that it's never going to happen, stop and remember. Look back so you can move forward with confidence. God was faithful then. He's faithful now. And he will be faithful still. Conclusion. The wait wasn't wasted. So here we are. Maybe you've been walking through a season that feels like delay after delay. Maybe you've been afraid to try again because of past failures. Maybe you've been clinging so tightly to your timeline that you've been missing what God is trying to do right now in the waiting. But what if, just what if, the waiting wasn't wasted? What if the failure wasn't failure at all, but preparation? What if the closed door wasn't rejection, but redirection? What if your timeline, being off, isn't a sign of defeat, but proof that God is doing something deeper? You see, we serve a God who doesn't just restore time, he redeems it. He takes broken pieces and builds purpose. He takes long seasons and produces lasting fruit. He takes what looks like nothing and brings life out of it. And friend, if you've been carrying the weight of disappointment, of comparison, of fear, you don't have to carry it anymore. You can let go. Let go of the pressure to have it all figured out. Let go of the timeline you built in your head. Let go of the fear that says you're running out of time. And take hold of this truth: God's timing is perfect. You may not understand it yet. You may not see the full picture. You may still be in the middle of the mess. But He's working, He's weaving, He's writing a story that's better than the one you were trying to rush into. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, you'll look back and say, God, I'm so glad you didn't do it my way. I'm so glad you took your time. I'm so glad you knew better. So today, stop fearing failure. Start trusting again. Not in your plan, not in your performance, but in the God who holds time, seasons, and your entire future in His hands. He's not late, He's not silent, He's not done, and neither are you. Take a deep breath. You're exactly where you need to be, in the hands of a God who never fails.